I'm Adam.
And I'm Sugar.
And this is
Where there's a Williams, there's a way.
Hey, Sugar, have you ever been to a rainforest?
You may not have noticed, but I'm a polar bear.
That doesn't mean you can't travel.
No, not interested. If I had my choice, I would travel to the finest walk-in freezers across the world. It's a perfect place to store popsicles.
Okay. This week's book doesn't have popsicles. Parrots Over Puerto Rico by Susan L. Roth and Cindy Trumbore. Collages by Susan L. Roth. Above the treetops of Puerto Rico flies a flock of parrots as green as their island home. If you look up from the forest, and you're very lucky, you might catch the bright blue flashes of their flight feathers and hear their harsh call. These are Puerto Rican parrots. They lived on this island for millions of years, and then they nearly vanished from the earth forever. This is their story.
Vanish like a magic trick?
Nope, like losing their home and dying.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that this was a scary book.
I'm pretty sure it's not. I bet that it has a happy ending. Long before people came to Puerto Rico, hundreds of thousands of parrots flew over the island and smaller islands nearby. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called as they looked for deep nesting holes in the tall trees. Down below, waves from the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean washed the island's white sand beaches. Delicate orchids and widespread ferns, tiny tree frogs, kapok trees bursting with seed pods, and big scaly iguanas covered the island. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called as they flew to Sierra palm trees to eat their dark, bitter fruit. Around 5000 BCE, people came to the island in canoes from lands to the south. These people planted corn, yucca, sweet potatoes, peanuts, and pineapples. When they looked up, they saw the bright blue flashes of flight feathers. More groups of people came. The Taínos arrived around 800 CE. They hunted the parrots for food and kept them as pets. Taínos gave the parrots a name, Igakwa, after their harsh call. They gave the island a name too, Rican. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called when hurricane winds blew down the old trees where they had their nest. After the hurricanes passed, the parrots flew through the treetops to find new nesting holes. Christopher Columbus sailed from Europe to Rican in 1493 and claimed the island for Spain. Soon, Spanish settlers were planting crops on the island and building houses and schools with wood, brick, and stone. Each time hurricanes destroyed their homes and schools, the settlers rebuilt them. The Spaniards called the parrots cotoras, and they gave the island a new name, Puerto Rico, rich port. In the treetops, the parrots searched for mates. The new pairs of parrots sat on branches, bowing, calling back and forth to each other, and fluffing their wings and tails. Each pair raised one family of chicks every year. Now people from many other parts of the world came to live in Puerto Rico. In 1513, Africans were brought to the island to toil as slaves under the hot sun in fields of sugarcane and other crops. More people came from Spain too, and they married Taínos and Africans. They all called themselves Boricuas, people of Boriquen, but they were still ruled by Spain. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called when red-tailed hawks chased them in the treetops. The parrots flocked together to protect themselves from the hawks. For centuries, people from other countries in Europe tried to capture Puerto Rico. These countries wanted to control the deep harbor at San Juan, the capital city, where merchant ships and warships could be launched. The Boricuas protected their island. Starting in 1539, they built a fort that grew and grew until its walls were 18 feet, 5.5 meters thick. For hundreds of years, no country was able to take Puerto Rico away from Spain. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called when they found that their nesting holes had been invaded by creatures brought to the island by settlers. Black rats from the settlers' ship climbed the tall trees and ate the parrot's eggs. Honeybees that had escaped from hives swarmed into the parrot's nests. In 1898, the United States declared war on Spain. The war was really about Cuba, another of Spain's colonies, but the fighting spilled over into Puerto Rico.
Rats? Bees? War? I thought you said this wasn't a scary book.
No, it's just setting up a hero's journey.
A hero's what?
A hero's journey is where a character has to overcome great obstacles to succeed.
What does that have to do with the jungle?
The parrots are the heroes of this story. Right now, we're learning what they have to do to persevere. Thousands of American soldiers landed on the island and began battling Spanish troops. Spain lost the war and lost control of Puerto Rico. The island became a territory of the United States. And in 1917, Puerto Ricans became U.S. citizens. Igacua, Igacua, the parrots called as the forests where they made their nests were cut down. The parrots began to disappear from places where they had flown for millions of years. By 1937, there were only about 2,000 Puerto Rican parrots in the Loquillo Mountains to the east. A few years later, the parrots were living in just one place, El Yunque, a tropical rainforest in those mountains. After Puerto Ricans gained American citizenship, many of them moved to the United States. Those who stayed in rural parts of the island built houses and farms in the areas where parrots had once lived. Many of the parrots' tall trees were made into charcoal for use for cooking fires, and people still hunted and trapped the parrots. In the 1950s, birds called pearly-eyed thrashers moved into the rainforest and tried to steal the parrots' nesting holes. Like clever thieves, these birds enter places where other birds are struggling to live and compete with them for nest sites. The parrots fought the thrashers, jabbing at them with their sharp beaks and defending their nests with harsh cries. But the parrots now had too many enemies and too few trees. The flock became smaller and smaller. By 1954, there were only 200 parrots left. Puerto Ricans elected their first governor, and the island became a U.S. Commonwealth, not a state, not an independent nation, but something in between. The people argued, should their island remain a Commonwealth? Should it be a state? Should it be independent of the United States? Everyone had different ideas, but all were proud to say, Yo soy Boricua, I am Puerto Rican. The flock of Puerto Rican parrots became even smaller. By 1967, only 24 parrots lived in El Yunque. Igacua, Igacua, these parrots called as they looked for someplace, any place to find food and nesting holes for their chicks.
This is stressing me out. Only 24 parrots left in the whole world?
That is pretty scary.
Yeah, almost as scary as those pearly-eyed thrashes. They don't seem like they're very good neighbors.
Yeah, but it's gotta get better. Puerto Ricans looked up and saw that their Igacuas were almost gone. People had nearly caused the parrots to become extinct. Now people started to help the parrots stay alive. In 1968, the governments of the United States and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico worked together to create the Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program. Its goal was to save and protect the parrots. The first part of the plan was to create an aviary, a safe place for parrots to live and raise their chicks. Parrots squawked as scientists with long-handled nets gently lifted eggs and chicks from their nesting holes. The scientists always left at least one egg or chick in each nest so some birds could continue living in the wild. In 1973, Loquillo Aviary opened in El Yunque. Incubators in the aviary kept the eggs warm. The Puerto Rican parrots raised in captivity had no experience as parents, so Hispaniolan parents helped raise the chicks. These parrots came from the nearby island of Hispaniola. They are like cousins of Puerto Rican parrots, but are not as rare. Once hundreds of thousands of Puerto Rican parrots flew over the island. By 1975, only 13 parrots were left in the rainforest. The worried scientists built special nesting boxes and put them in trees in areas where the parrots were likely to nest. The parrots inspected the nesting boxes and then moved in. These nesting boxes were deep and dark, like the nesting holes Puerto Rican parrots find in the wild. A bird sitting at the top of the box could not see all the way to the bottom. Pearly-eyed thrashers like to see the bottoms of their nest, so the thrashers left the parrots' nesting boxes alone.
Now there are only 13 left. I don't know if I can finish.
But didn't you hear? People realized that they needed to help, and they built an aviary.
Then kidnap the birds.
Don't think of it like that. Think about taking them to a resort. Don't worry, it'll get better.
I worry so much.
We'll get through this.
I'm skeptical.
Wild parrots squawked as scientists gently placed chicks from the aviary in their nests so the chicks could learn how to live in the wild. In 1979, the very first chick raised in the aviary flapped out of a wild nest into the rainforest. The scientists worked hard to keep the parrots healthy, both the captive and the wild birds. One chick was rescued from the wild after its wing was badly damaged by gooey slime inside its nest. The scientists rebuilt the baby parrot's wings using old discarded parrot feathers, pins, and glue. Then they watched the parrot use its new wings to fly for the first time. By the end of 1979, there were 15 captive parrots. Most had come from eggs and chicks taken from the wild nests to the aviary. Hurricane Hugo roared through the treetops of Puerto Rico in 1989.
A hurricane? I can't do this.
But didn't you hear? The numbers are up, and the scientists made a new wing for that baby.
I guess, but I don't know how much more I can take.
Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called as the winds blew down many of their tall trees. The hurricane wiped out crops and wrecked buildings and homes. In the aviary, the scientists worried about all the parrots. What if another bad hurricane blew down more trees? What if the aviary was damaged? Igakwa, Igakwa. A group of parrots squawked as scientists moved them from Loquillo Aviary to a new aviary in Rio Bajo Forest. This forest is less humid than El Yunque, and many parrots had once lived there. Now there were two safe places for captive parrots to live and raise chicks. Rio Bajo Aviary opened in 1993. It had some challenges. Thunderstorms sometimes caused the incubators to lose power. The scientists found generators that kept the power flowing to the incubators. The scientists also tried some new ideas. They kept more aggressive pairs of parrots away from gentler ones, so the gentler birds would not be frightened. They also caged young parrots with adults, so the birds could see how the adult parrot behaved. The number of parrots in the aviary grew. By 1999, Rio Bajo Aviary had 54 Puerto Rican parrots. The recovery program was ready for the next part of its plan, releasing adult parrots raised in captivity into the wild.
Listen to that. 54. It's working.
Okay. I just feel bad for those little guys.
Things are looking up.
Yeah, but now I'm starting to worry that they don't have any ice.
Ice? Parrots don't need ice.
How else do they make snowballs or snow cones?
I don't think that parrots care about those things.
They're missing out.
In 2000, 10 captive-bred parrots were released in El Yunque. It was late spring. The wild chicks had already flown from their nests, and the wild adults were still nearby, where the captive-bred parrots could see them and join them. Igakwa, Igakwa, the parrots called as they flew with the newcomers and searched for food. The captive-bred parrots had been trained to find food and avoid hawks, but many were caught by hawks anyway. So before the next 16 parrots were released in 2001, they were given extra training. They heard a hawk's whistle as the cutout shape of a hawk was passed over their cages. They watched a trained hawk attack a Hispaniolan parrot that was wearing a protective leather jacket. In time, the parrots learned to stay still or hide if a hawk was nearby. When these parrots were released, more of them survived in the wild. The scientists were ready to create a second wild flock. In 2006, 22 captive-bred parrots were released in Rio Bajo Forest. The newly released birds formed pairs, found nesting boxes, and raise their chicks. Dozens of parrots have been released in Rio Bajo since then, and they have begun to spread out throughout the forest. If you look up from the forest, and you're very lucky, you might catch the bright blue flashes of flight feathers. These are Puerto Rican parrots. They lived on this island for millions of years, and then they nearly vanished from the earth forever. But they're flying over Puerto Rico still, calling Igakwa, Igakwa.
See, I told you. They're making a big comeback.
Okay, but it sure sounds like there's a lot more to do.
I think that you're right, Sugar. Keep watching and maybe you'll come up with an idea.
Afterward, the Puerto Rican parrot, Amazona vittata, is the only parrot native in the United States and its territories. It is a striking bird, about 1 foot, 30.5 centimeters in length, with green feathers, blue flight feathers, a red blaze on its forehead, and wide white rings around its eyes. The parrots give a distinctive bugle or call of Igakwa, Igakwa in flight, probably to tell other parrots their direction and speed. Scientists estimate the population was between 100,000 and 1 million birds on the main island of Puerto Rico and the nearby islands of Culebra, Vieques, and Moña in the late 15th century when Christopher Columbus arrived in Puerto Rico. The history of the parrots is closely linked to the history of Puerto Rico. The parrots' numbers began to shrink in the 19th and 20th centuries as their nesting trees were cut down for logging and farming. Natural enemies, including red-tailed hawks, competitors for nesting holes such as the pearly-eyed thrashers, the taking of young parrots for pets, and massive hurricanes that devastated the parrots' nesting areas also contributed to their decline. Puerto Rican parrots have been described as one of the 10 most endangered birds in the world. The Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program, PRP, is dedicated to conserving, protecting, and managing both wild and captive populations of the parrots, so that its status will be changed from endangered to threatened. Begun in 1968, the PRP is a cooperative effort between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Puerto Rican Department of Natural and Environmental Resources, and the U.S. Geological Survey. The goal of the PRP is to have self-sufficient wild populations of birds in at least 3 locations: El Yunque, a rainforest in the Luquillo Mountains, Rio Bajo Forest, a drier forest in northwestern Puerto Rico, and a location to be established in the western part of the island by 2016. Possibly the rugged Maracao forest, where abandoned plantations and farms have been reforested over the past 60 years. The existence of multiple flocks of parrots has many benefits. Widespread flocks provide a greater chance that a parrot will survive a natural disaster such as a hurricane. Parrots that mate from the different flocks have a wider gene pool and produce chicks with a better chance of survival. In the vast areas such as Rio Bajo, a growing population of wild parrot can spread out farther and farther from the aviary site. About a dozen of the birds released from Rio Bajo Aviary have relocated to Lake Dos Bocas, 3 miles from the aviary. 3 released birds have been spotted 20 miles away. Survival rates of the parrots grow with each release. Currently, there are about 150 birds in each of the 2 aviaries and between 60 and 95 birds in the wild in El Yunque and Rio Bajo Forest combined. In 2013, breeding season is expected to produce a record 100 fledglings in the wild and 2 aviaries. Scientists at both aviaries agree that the key to success has been the existence of an established flock of wild birds that can use their vigilance and knowledge of the forest to guide and protect new released birds. Since 2001, the parrots have nested exclusively in the artificial nesting boxes, but the scientists hope to find parrots in the wild nest one day. The recovery of the Puerto Rican parrot is a tribute to the passionate and hard-working staff members in the 2 aviaries. In the words of Ricardo Valentin de la Rosa, who manages Rio Bajo Aviary, "I have dedicated my life to saving these extraordinary creatures, which are profoundly emotive, very independent, and a true nightmare to breed in captivity. The scientist's respectful approach to the captive and wild birds is a model for any program dedicated to protecting and managing an endangered species.
It seems like things are working out.
Yes, it does. But it takes a lot of people working hard to help these birds.
I just wish that I had a better understanding of the timeline of when things happened.
Then, my friend, you're in luck. That's what's next.
Important dates in the history of Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican parrots. 5000 BCE, first people arrive in Puerto Rico from South America. 2000 BCE, people from Central America arrive. 500 CE, Arawak people from South America travel to Puerto Rico. They become known as Taínos. 1493, Christopher Columbus lands on Puerto Rico on second journey to the West Indies. 1508, Juan Ponce de Leon founds a settlement in Puerto Rico. Island's first school is built. 1513, first Africans arrive in Puerto Rico. Spanish government gives settlers permission to marry Taínos. 1928, French soldiers attack many Puerto Rican settlements. Capital city San Juan survives. 1539, construction begins on Fort San Felipe del Morro and continues for 400 years. British Navy. 1595, British Navy tries to capture Puerto Rican and fails. 1598, British Navy attacks and holds Puerto Rico for several months but flees when plague breaks out among its troops. 1629, Dutch troops attack San Juan and are defeated by Spanish soldiers. 1702, British soldiers attack city of Arecibo without success. 1797, after Spain and France declare war on England, British troops invade Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican volunteers and Spanish soldiers fight off attack of thousands of British troops. 1868, in city of Lares, group of Puerto Ricans rebels against Spanish rule. Rebellion is planned by Dr. Ramon Emeterio Betances, with troops led by Manuel Rojas. 1873, slavery abolished in Puerto Rico. 1890, flocks of 50 to 200 parrots seen throughout northwestern Puerto Rico, including Rio Bajo Forest. 1898, Spanish loses war of 1898, gives Puerto Rico to the United States. 1917, Puerto Ricans become citizens of the United States. 1935, in Loquillo Mountains, U.S. Forest Service begins program of cutting down trees considered inferior for timber. Many Palo Colorado trees, the most important nesting trees for Puerto Rican parrots, are removed. 1937, U.S. Forest Service employees estimate number of Puerto Rican parrots in Puerto Rico at 2,000 birds. 1940, parrots found only in El Yunque National Forest. 1948, Luis Muñoz Marin becomes first elected governor of Puerto Rico. 1952, Puerto Rico becomes the United States Commonwealth. 1954, about 200 Puerto Rican parrots counted in El Yunque. 1950s, pearly-eyed thrashers, nearly unknown in El Yunque until this time, spread into the forest and compete with Puerto Rican parrots for nesting sites. 1967, about 24 Puerto Rican parrots remain in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican parrots classified as an endangered species. 1968, Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program, PRPRP, formed, dedicated to study and saving the birds. 1970, PRPRP begins captive breeding program in Loquillo Mountains. 1973, Loquillo Aviary opens in El Yunque. 1975, only 13 Puerto Rican parrots left in the wild. 1976, PRPRP begins putting artificial nesting boxes in trees for the parrots. 1979, Loquillo Aviary has 15 captive birds. First captive-bred Puerto Rican parrot, chick, flies from its nest in the wild. 1989, Hurricane Hugo devastates Puerto Rico, knocking down many trees bearing fruit, flowers, and leaves that make up the parrot's diet. Only 22 parrots survive in the wild. 1993. First group of Puerto Rican parrots transferred to a new aviary in Rio Bajo Forest. 1994. First breeding season in Rio Bajo Aviary produces 2 Puerto Rican parrot fledglings, or young birds. 1999. Rio Bajo Aviary has population of 54 Puerto Rican parrots. 2000. First 10 captive-bred Puerto Rican parrots released from Loquillo Aviary into El Yunque. 2001. Another 16 Puerto Rican parrots, trained to find food in the wild and avoid predators, released into El Yunque. 2002. Another 9 captive-bred Puerto Rican parrots released in El Yunque. Total of 144 captive birds now live in the 2 aviaries. 2006. First 22 Puerto Rican parrots fitted with radio transmitters so they can be tracked, released into Rio Bajo Forest. Rio Bajo Aviary produces 29 fledglings in one season, a turning point because with more fledglings produced than released, the program becomes self-sustained. 2007. Upgraded Loquillo Aviary, now called U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Igacua Aviary, opens in Loquillo Forest, includes hurricane room to protect parrots in case of storms. 2008. More Puerto Rican parrots released into Rio Bajo Forest, 2 active nests seen there. 2012. Rio Bajo Aviary has 10 breeding pairs of Puerto Rican parrots in the wild. Between 60 and 95 wild birds live in the 2 forests, and about 150 captive birds live in each aviary. Puerto Ricans show support in non-binding referendums to change Puerto Rico's status, expressing preference to become the 51st U.S. state, but many reasons make it unlikely the island's status will change in the near future. 2013. Total number of fledgling in the wild and the 2 aviaries expected to exceed 100, a record for the program. 2020. PRPRP objective is to have Puerto Rican parrots downlisted from endangered to threatened status by this date.
Wow, I feel like I'm an expert now.
I don't know if I'd go so far as to say expert, but definitely more informed.
I've made up my mind. I know how I can help.
Oh yeah? How's that?
I'm moving to the rainforest and opening a food trailer.
A food trailer?
Yup. I'll bring the finest snow cones that these parrots have ever seen.
Well, that was an unexpected twist. Hopefully after reading this book, more people will take action towards helping out too. I'm Adam.
And I'm Sugar.
And this is
Where there's a Williams, there's a way.
Did you know the Puerto Rican Amazon parrot, one of the rarest birds in the world, is native to Puerto Rico?